So we're working through the Gospel according to St. Matthew, and we've had sort of a disjointed beginning. We began at the first Sunday of Advent. But I bounced around there because in Advent we wanted to look at all those passages in Matthew where Matthew was drawing upon the prophets in describing what the Messiah, this God with us, was really all about. So I just thought I would kind of give you the plot, the catch-up, to bring you to today's passage. Most of you probably know the story, but lots of times we conflate it with the Gospel of Luke or Gospel of John. But in Matthew, what happens is the first thing, Jesus is indeed born. But then this is the one where the Magi come. Now, what are Magi? I've heard them called everything from astrologers to wise kings. Right? But the reality is there's something about the mystery of the foundations of creation that's involved in that Greek word there. Something about the mysteries, the depth, the structures, the spiritual structures beneath it all. Some people might call that esoteric wisdom. But those people came to be with this child because this child would illumine those mysteries. Next story we hear is Jesus is baptized and then sent into the wilderness for his character to be formed. He didn't go out there to be tested to find out if he'd fail. This was a test that formed the character. Following that, he came into Galilee and began to teach and gathered around him disciples. Now, the Hebrew word for that would be Talmudim. You heard of the Talmud? Okay, these are rabbis that gather around schools of people that can be formed with a particular teaching. So Jesus was gathering around a group of people to be formed very carefully with a teaching that was deep, embedded in the mysteries of the world. And so then he saw the crowds and he went up to the mountain in chapter 5 and he sat down with his disciples when they came to him. And he began to speak and he taught them. As he taught, he gave the Beatitudes, and after the Beatitudes, he said something really strange. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And from there, our text begins. You have heard that it was said in those ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. If you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, well, you leave your gift there and at the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with an accuser while you're on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to a judge and the judge to the guard, and you'll be thrown in prison. And truly I tell you, you will never get out until you've paid the last penny. You've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. Well, I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out, throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go to hell. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Well, I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Oh, wasn't that text fun? Text has always been a bit problematic. Because it really sets the standard pretty high, doesn't it? Sets the standard pretty high, so high, in fact, everybody's trying to get around it. You know, all kinds of scholarly debates about whether Jesus actually intended his disciples to live in this way, or whether maybe Jesus was setting up an ideal that, well, you know, we should reach for, maybe a picture of what heaven will be like. One way to look at it. I think he's pretty clear. Trouble is, it's too hard. No murder? Well, I can live with that. I really can, but no anger? You know, that's just not realistic. And it's really fair even to expect it. And then there's the, you know, the lust thing. You know, I can, you know, I'm okay with not, with being faithful in my marriage. I really am, but no lusting? It's very confusing to me. And you figure divorce in our society. I mean, you know, there are limits to how much you can deal with in a given relationship. Things sometimes probably should tear apart. In any case, you know, and then loving your enemy. What's going on with that? That kind of goes against our basic human instincts or survival to love an enemy like that. And then it gets really uncomfortable because he has to bring judgment into the picture. You know, if you do lust in your heart, if you, you know, if you do divorce, if you do these various things, then you will be judged. And not only did he talk about judgment, he talked about hell of fire. You're going to burn. And so now all of a sudden we're thinking about that God up there. You know the one. He sits up there. I call him the Santa Claus God these days. Why Santa Claus? Because he's making a list and he's checking it twice. And it's all about whether or not you did something good or bad. You know, so you die and you go to heaven, to this judgment seat. You've seen the movies, right? And then somebody checks your life against what you should do, and I know Jesus is supposed to cover it, but, you know, according to him, you know, you're really in trouble if you don't behave exactly the way this says. If you're angry, no good. So what this image of God is, this judge up on this throne that's either going to let us into bliss and peacefulness forever and ever, or send us down into the fire of hell. What this image of God does is it sets us up for a couple of mistakes, and one of them is we start to justify our behavior. I even started it right then. Anger. So right away I'm thinking to myself, okay, we're subject to the hell of fire if we say you fool. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but last week I preached Dr. King's sermon, and Dr. King was quoting a text from Jesus himself. Why did Jesus call a man a fool? Well, if Jesus is going to get angry like that, apparently I can get angry like that, so the text must not mean don't get angry. Or what about that time Jesus got angry at those money changers, even took a whip out and beat them? You know, it's funny, every time I put out a pacifist stance and I say, you know, Jesus wants us to turn the other cheek, people bring that one up like it justifies all the war of all time. We justify our positions, our moral positions, if we think about that God up there. Lust. Okay, so my friend Mark was here the last couple of weeks, last couple of Saturdays, and he was pointing out that this is a masculine thing, the lust part. It tends to be that, you know, the masculine's very visual, you know, and so the masculine tends to lust inside. And the interesting thing about us, we don't need a whole woman. Just a part will do. Okay? You know, it's biological, for crying out loud. This is unrealistic, so we can justify. We can say, hey, you know, lusting, it's just the way it is. It's the way God made me, so you're going to burn me for making me the way. It gets very confusing, you see. And how about divorce? My goodness gracious, in this society just tears people apart. We live in a society where people expect that their needs will be fulfilled. All of their needs will be fulfilled in a love-marriage relationship. Pretty unrealistic, actually. All their needs will be fulfilled in a relationship. We have that expectation. And then, you know, it's very easy to disentangle a marriage. Yeah, you just disentangle, maybe you move, you get a whole new set of friends, everything's fine. And it's very easy to do that, and then it gets easier still because we are at a time when people are changing and changing fast, and there's this stuff where they outgrow one another. I remember the first couple who were close to me who got married and then divorced. I remember this very clearly. They got married, and about 2 or 3 years later, the young woman in the marriage discovered women's rights and liberation. And she wasn't going to live in the marriage the way it was set up, and he wasn't going to change. She outgrew him. It's like in our society, things are growing so fast, happening so fast, that the couples are torn apart, and so it's really pretty easy to justify the divorce. Frankly, a little unrealistic. So we busily justify, because we want to keep that, God up there that's making his list and checking it twice, want to keep that at bay. And we do that long enough, and finally, as most of the people in our culture, I say in our culture because I don't think you're here, so I don't think it's you. All right? But a lot of people have simply said, yeah, that God's not up there, I'll do whatever the hell I want. Isn't that the way our culture operates? Oh, we talk about being altruistic, and we're going to do the things that we want, but the things that we want, naturally, I want the right thing. We trust ourselves to be able to make those decisions. That's what happens when we put that God up there. He's going to judge us. We create a little shell around us. But we don't think that God's up there, do we? Maybe you do. Hard to get rid of that idea. As my dad likes to say, if God's up there and hell is down there 12 hours later, where's it going to be? It's just not the way we look at it. It's not the way we look at it. Our expanse, our idea of who God is and how God works in the world simply isn't going to be that narrow and small. So the God of judgment that sits on a throne doesn't make it. And to be honest with you, I don't believe that Matthew thought so either. I don't think Jesus, to the degree he wrote these words, I don't think Jesus thought that. I think even to them there was something deeper in the structure going on. Because think about Matthew, he's deeper than that. He's deeper than something like Zeus on Mount Zion or something. Now, Matthew was all about the mysteries, the underlying structures, spiritual realms of the world in which we live. He was all about that. And so it seems to me that he had a sense that it wasn't all about some caricature that Disney could put together. Now, he knew something else was going on when he wrote these words, some of which he certainly took from Jesus. And then there's that other thing that really strikes me, that makes me think they're going after the deeper mysteries and wisdom. It's that rather strange verse that I talked about, and maybe it didn't even seem strange to you. But let's talk about it.